disciples, and welcome to today's children's sermon. So, do any of you have chores that you need to do? I have a lot of chores that I need to do to keep my apartment running smoothly. So, I need to go grocery shopping and cook my food and wash the dishes and sweep the floor and mop the floor and wipe the counters down and scrub my toilet and tidy my bedroom and tidy my living room and vacuum the floor. Phew! That's a lot of chores. That's like 10 chores that I have to do every single week. Do you guys have to do that many chores? Well, in the Bible, God gave the Israelites commandments. And commandments are kind of like chores that you do just to keep your life running in order. Except God didn't give the Israelites just 10 commandments. He gave them 613 laws for them to follow all the time. And you thought it was bad when your parents made you clean your room. Can you imagine having to do 613 chores? That sounds really hard. The good news is that when Jesus came to earth, he announced that there are only 2 commandments that you need to follow. Love God and love your neighbor. If you guys can follow these 2 commandments, all of the rest are covered. The bad news is that there was a group of religious leaders called the Pharisees, and they lived at the same time as Jesus. The Pharisees were so afraid of breaking one of God's laws that they added even extra rules on top of it to be super duper sure that they didn't break any of God's laws and make God angry. But the thing is, they were so focused on following all of the rules, they forgot that the 2 most important commands to follow are to love God and to love your neighbor. So Jesus told them a parable to help them understand that they were missing the point.
Welcome to Bible Stories with M. Today's Bible story is the parable of 2 sons found in the Gospel of Matthew. So there was a dad, and he had 2 sons. Let's say that the first son's name was Jimmy, and the second son's name was Albert. This dad had a vineyard, and he needed people to go work in it. Wait, this sounds oddly familiar. Oh, that's why. And so the dad went to go ask his sons to go work in the vineyard. So first the dad goes to Jimmy and says, "Hey Jimmy, I want you to go work in the vineyard today." But Jimmy was too busy making a TikTok video. So he said, "Nah, Dad, I'm not gonna go work in your vineyard." So then the dad went to Albert and said, "Hey Albert, I want you to go work in the vineyard today." And then Albert said, "Yes, father, since I'm the perfect model son, I will do what you ask and go work in your vineyard." But then something weird happened. Jimmy had an epiphany about how emotionally draining social media is, so he decided not to do his TikTok video and to go work in his dad's vineyard instead. And then Albert got distracted and decided to write a comprehensive paper on natural theology, so he never went to go work in his dad's vineyard at all. So Jimmy said that he wouldn't go work in the vineyard, but then he actually did go to work in the vineyard. And Albert said that he would go work in the vineyard, but then he never worked in the vineyard at all. So Jimmy is the one that did what his father wanted, even though he said he wouldn't in the beginning. The end.
So the parable is showing that God is like a dad who gives his kids a job to do. Love God and love your neighbor. So Jimmy, the kid who was going to make a TikTok video, but then went to work in the vineyard instead, is like the tax collectors and the sinners who disobeyed God's commands at first, but then they started to follow God's commands when they heard about the good news of Jesus. So then Albert, the kid who said he was going to go work in the vineyard, but then wrote a theological analysis instead, is like the Pharisees, because they said, "God, we are going to follow all of the rules." But then they forgot to follow the 2 most important rules: love God and love your neighbor. So, what do we learn from this parable? We learned that even though we have grace from God in Jesus, God still wants us to follow his 2 most important commandments: to love God and to love our neighbors. We also learned that it's never too late for us to start obeying God. Even if we've messed up before, we can still get on the right path of living anytime when we decide to love God and to love our neighbors, just like Jimmy changed his mind and went to go work in the vineyard. So the next time you guys are doing your chores, even if you're not having the most fun, I want you guys to remember that Jesus' most important commands are to love God and to love your neighbor. And I also want you guys to remember that it's never too late to start following these commands. Passy ciao, my young disciples. I'll see you next week. God still wants us to follow his 2 most important commands: to love God and to love Jesus. Love our name. That's a lot of theological implications there. Very interesting. The prophet of Jeremiah. This is such great literature. There's nothing that can compare to it, not even working in my father's vineyard. Oh my. This is quite fascinating. Oh, we have heard a cry of panic, of terror, and no peace. Now, ask and see, can a man bear a child? Why then I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman in labor? Why has every face turned pale? That's actual words.